We have Barth Quenzer with us.
Oh, goody, goody, goody.
Let me see. I can't say enough of wonderful things about Barth. So I'll just say that I've known Barth for, gosh, going on a little over 15 years. Barth is new to getting an intuitive report, and we wanted to hear Barth's perspective as a newbie to receiving an intuitive report, as well as getting his just basic, like really in the raw perspective of, oh my God, I've only had this report for 1 month now. What does it feel like? What's it sound like? So without further ado, Paul, let's bring Barth in and talk about what it's like to get an intuitive report for the first time. Barth Quenzer is here with us.
Hello,
How
hi
are you?
Captain. I'm good. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Barth. It's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, it is good. It's good to be here.
Well, we are going to delve into your experience of coming to the point where you registered for an intuitive report and actually receiving your report and your impressions and all of that. So hopefully this will be good for people who are considering having an intuitive report and also a little bit of guidance on what to do with a report. I guess what's the first question, Capucine,
The
that we're
first
going to ask
question
you?
is, Barth, why why did you choose to get one? Number one. And then the second question, you can start whichever one. It's what do we need to know about you that led you to even getting an intuitive report? So you can play around with both of those questions simultaneously.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So, good question. So, what led me to want to get the report? Um, you invited me. One thing,
It always begins
and
with an
Yes.
it
invitation.
it was an invitation, but there were several things that had happened prior to that that just sort of got me interested and ready for something like this. So I'm gonna go back a little bit in time and talk about a few of the things that you shared with me, Capucine,
Sure.
that sort of primed me for an interest in this. Honestly, the report is, I guess the world of metaphysics is not in my realm of understanding or expertise or experience. It hasn't been. So um, it took a few, um, I think, subtle invitations and nudgings from you to get me to a place where I would be open to this, honestly. But then something happened this year I'll talk about too that really set a sense of urgency for me to really say I'm open. I'm open to this. I'm open to anything
Mhm.
that might provide some insight and guidance onto some of the things that are going on in my life. But okay, so first thing that you did, Capucine, was you shared one of your reports with me, and this was several years ago. Um, and at the time, I remember listening to it with you and just thinking with just an open and curious mind about what I was hearing and just reflecting with you about what that meant from your own life and your own lived experience. And so that was the first step for me. Um, I still didn't understand the whole context of the report and where these came from. It just didn't, there was nothing in my understanding and my own paradigm that allowed me to um, really understand anything more about it except for your own enthusiasm. Um, and then something else happened, probably about a year later. You got your PhD. You wrote this dissertation, this lovely dissertation about the implications of reincarnation in education. Um, and when I read that, it opened up a little door for me, something I hadn't really expected. I began to think about reincarnation in a new way. And I came to realize that I had thought about, it's not that I had not thought about, say, like reincarnation, this idea of dharma or karma, before, but I had, in a sense, taken it for granted that I had an understanding of what this was. And I remember talking about reincarnation with my brother when we were kids, trying to understand, like, well, what is that? How does that work?
Mm.
And it came to sort of this, I think it was like a Newtonian kind of understanding of, like, energy can can't be created nor destroyed, right? Is that the first
Mm-hmm.
piece of the law, right? And so it was this, my brother and I came to this conclusion when we were young that yeah, so when you die, obviously you become the other things. You become the grass, the trees, the flowers. Your energy just sort of morphs into this other um, way of being. And I was content with that kind of understanding of reincarnation for a long time until I read your dissertation on it and had a greater perspective on it. And that set in motion for me, um, just like reconsidering how my life worked. Did I have other past lives that have contributed to this one? And if so, what were they, and how does that work? And so I just started to inquire more about that side of my own understandings at that point. And over this last year, I had my own uh, like spiritual challenges that just sort of started very quickly in the last fall, and this is about a year ago now. And I entered what I can only call like this dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
And it really set in motion for me a whole series of uh, seeking and trying to understand things that I didn't understand yet. Didn't have the capacity to really understand. So it was a stretching, and it was a deepening, and it was a very big learning experience for me, just personally. And so by the time you invited me for the intuitive report, I was finally at a place where I could be open enough and receptive enough to receive something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a long road to get there, to just be open to it. I was honestly a little bit hesitant at first, only because I was personally just kind of um, fearful of, well, what would come out of this report? Do I want to know what comes out of it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
do
That's
I,
pretty typical. Yeah.
right? And so it took some time for me just to get over that and say, you know what, this is for the experience of it. I trust Capucine, and I have listened to the other podcasts, and so I had a little bit of background by that point, of a little bit more about it. And honestly, it's just it's still mysterious to me. So I don't I can't explain it to others when others have asked me, so what was that? What is the report? I don't have the capacity yet to fully explain to them what the Akashic records are and how this all works. And my brain is very scientific, so it wants to know how these things work. But
Mm-hmm.
I also have some stories I'm going to share with you later about what happened after the report. I've had some very interesting things in my life that happened that have opened me up a little bit further
Yeah.
too. So that's what led me there for sure.
Yeah. That's a familiar story, actually. I've heard a lot of people say that they had to go through an opening process in order to even say, okay, fine, I'm gonna have one of those reports that you guys have talked about for years. It's I think that's one of the most important aspects of receiving a report is the openness and the readiness to receive it. It doesn't really work, and Capucine and I have talked about this before, doesn't work so well if somebody buys one for another person. Say, oh, Grandpa would love this. Let's get him a past life profile. No, it's it's got to be wanted, and there has to be a place to receive it.
I think, Barth, you also mentioned a few things that I think are really worth pulling out. Um, you, you, there were times when I'd say, in my personality, I would say, oh, Barth, you ought to get one. God, these are so da 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 da. You always had this way of just gauging, I will, but not now. Like you knew that there would be a time when that door would open for you. I mean, I don't know if you knew that, but you were, whether it's polite, good manners, you didn't never shut the door completely, but you always had a sense of, I'll know it when I know it, when I need to enter in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another thing that's worth sharing with other people. It's like if you're hesitant now, no worries, no worries. If you want to dive in, dive in. But
Yeah.
this was Barth's way of approaching it. And Barth, again, a little bit more background around you. Barth, you are an educator, you're a visual artist, you're a teacher. You also completed your PhD and did a lot more research around the inner and the outer world of the landscape of just a teacher. But you've created wonderful, wonderful experiences for kids at the elementary level because of their curiosity, their imagination. You've won multiple awards and you've been recognized in a lot of different ways for your efforts to work with the world of that inner outer landscape, to urge teachers to keep pushing themselves to explore worlds beyond that they already know. So you may say you didn't understand the metaphysical world, but myself, as a person that was your colleague, a mentor, um, I I knew that the steps that you were already initiating had everything to do with the metaphysical world. So even if we don't put a name on that, you already were practicing things, even if we don't have to put labels on them. We could call it you were practicing things that had to do with purple. I mean, you just always had this insight. And I'll also say this about your background, if I may, that you also come from a family of highly, highly intelligent professionals. So, I mean, I think all of these elements played a part in your own this lifetime around development. So, anything that I just said there, do you want to add on to anything about that or?
Oh, you're right, Capucine. I actually understand more than I think I know about it, and I've understood that more this year than any other year. Um, and I do have a story to tell you about like from my perspective what it means to engage with the intuitive mind.
Mhm.
Um, and I know that when we're born as children, we come into the world as intuitive beings. That's the only way we know. We don't have the experiential, um, knowledge to engage with the world in any other way. I do know that my parents, I came into the world as a very sensitive person, a very intuitive person, but I didn't have the context and the conditions to nurture that, and so that was lost for a long period of time. And it wasn't until I was around my early 20s that I began to re-engage with the intuition, the intuitive mind of knowing for myself. That road for me, I eventually, I remember standing at the fork in the road, and the moment of sort of that initiation, okay, if you go down this path, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be extremely rewarding, but you're going to have to face all your stuff. You're going to have to go through the process. The other way was the path of avoidance and say, well, you can postpone it. You still have to do it, but you won't have to do it right now, right?
Mhm.
And so I do remember very specifically that moment when I was given those two options. Do I pursue this path of growth and awakening? That's going to be very hard, sometimes painful. Or do I go down this other path of distraction and avoidance? Unfortunately, as a younger person, I chose the other path. But I am 45 now, and I'm coming back to um, um, those earlier insights and wanting to continue again on that path. What I found is that there were no shortcuts. I had to literally pick up with where I left off. And so there's about 20-year period of me gaining a lot of experience in teaching and learning, um, and all of that, those life experiences. But that spiritual path for me is a very specific one, and it has to be, for me, it was something that has to be, I had to be, um, committed to
Mhm.
fully.
Right.
And that's like where I'm at right now. So it
Yep.
gives you a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm in that space, and it's like I'm right at the fork again, and it's sort of presenting itself. Do you want to go down that path? That's going to be really hard, or do you want to keep distracting yourself in the way that you do so well, which I'm very good at doing, you
Yeah.
know? Um, so yeah, it's a very sensitive place where I'm at right now. I'm feeling very impressionable.
Did you feel kind of like a pressure inside or a nudge or a drawing to go deeper to do this exploration? Or was it more of a, do you think it was more of a mental choice? Like, yeah, I need to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Well, like Capucine said, there was a, I wasn't ready for it. I couldn't have received it any time prior to this, but now it was timely for me because I was just coming out of this cycle of what I can only describe as this dark night of the soul. And Capucine, you know a little bit about that because I shared that with you when it just started
Mhm.
to first happen for me
Mhm.
last fall, where
Mhm.
existentially my entire framework for understanding the world was breaking down.
Mhm.
And uh it was a moment where I had just finished my dissertation, just in that process really exceeded my expectations, and I was coming back into the world, and I was inviting in um, uh, the next phase of my work.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And what I was presented with felt like like a message from, like the universe or something saying, well, you've done good work, but now the real work begins. And so
Yeah.
it was a really crushing experience where
Yeah.
everything that I thought I understood about the world had to be renegotiated.
Yeah.
And it was a very difficult part, and there was a lot of like physical things that were happening to my body at the same time that made it challenging mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It was just I could only describe it as this existential crisis.
Hmm.
And so it was a crisis of meaning making, and I've been going through it for the course of the year, and I'm just now coming out of it. And interestingly, the report coincided with me right at that moment where I'm just coming out of it and
Just the
re-engaging. Yeah,
head is just above
exactly.
water. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. It was like was being pushed through this birth canal or something for almost an entire year, and suddenly I'm just
Hmm.
now coming out of the other end.
Hmm.
Taking a
Yeah.
look around the world, my new little world, and it looks different, it feels different. And I'm still having to like renegotiate with myself of how do I fit in this new context of my new self and this new world. And the report just helped, for whatever reason, facilitate that for me. It just was those, it came in at that time that was, I don't know, you could call it like a synchronicity or something.
Hmm. Do you think, um, do you think intellect maybe gets in the way of this intuitive side of life? Because I've thought about this quite a bit. Um, Almost like the more educated someone is, classically educated, academically educated, the more we try to seek head answers for things and intellectual answers for things, and it can almost take us farther away from that sensorial or intuitive experience, or at least seeking that.
Yeah, for me personally, yes. And that actually came up in the report for me. That is one of the things that I have to be really cautious of. My logical mind will
Can I pause you before you
oh
say
yeah.
anything, Quenzer? Because I think because that's a really good question, Paul. And I do, as Barth was just getting ready to say, how that kind of answered itself
Yeah, that's leading
in the
into
report.
the actual
But
report.
before we get into the report, can you set the stage, Quenz, for describe your experience of like just the whole thing, like the logistics. You came, you got it done, and just describe it to folks. And then we'll get into the actual what you heard, what you felt, that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was a pretty unique experience because I got a chance to hear 5 different reports, including mine, right, in that
Mhm.
moment. And
So you were present. We did them
right.
live.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So I got to see the process too, um, with you, Paul, and Christine, and Cap, you were there too, Capucine. So uh, all of that's a novel experience for me because I had never participated in that. Um,
Were you
so,
nervous when you
oh yeah,
started?
yeah,
Yeah.
but
Sitting on the couch. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think the third person to receive
Yeah,
the
you were
report.
there.
So by that time, I kind of had a little bit of understanding, like, okay, um, all I'm doing is literally I'm sitting there, I'm asking questions to Paul, Paul's asking questions to Christine, and we're just being present. And that's all is required, just a simple presence and simple openness. By the time it was time for my report, I did feel open. I did feel like an open vessel. Any kind of fears or anything, I just sort of released and said, you know what, I'm going to take whatever I get. I mean, and I'm going to own it, and I'm just going to, you know, be open to whatever I hear.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And by then also you probably had an idea that these reports are gentle and they're not,
right.
they're not
Mhm.
smack you up the side of the head with anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I did find that. There was nothing. There were some things in the report that challenged my perspectives, but it's not something I didn't fully already know on my own intuitive level.
Hmm.
But it was a gentle process, and I can't say that there was anything negative in the report at all. And by the time I had received my report, um, I felt like it was a tremendous gift. And I still take it as such. This has been a tremendous gift that's been given to me. I've shared it with my wife. She's had a chance to listen to it with me.
Oh God, I'd love to hear that.
Nice.
We've had a chance to reflect on it.
Mhm.
And I think she was just as amazed, or she was potentially more amazed by it than I was initially. And she
Mm.
was it was a very special experience. And I will keep coming back to the report time and time again just to kind of go back through and try to understand um, uh, what has been communicated here, because I guess there's lots of ways to interpret them. And so when I heard like the reports of the others that received the reports, it was like each report had its own language style
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
sense. Like um, I got a chance to hear other reports, and it wasn't as though I could connect to those other reports. It was as though those reports were tailored specifically to the individual so that they could hear it or receive it. There were things in my report, though, I'll share when we get into it,
Yep.
that were
Mhm.
just so specific. I don't know if anyone else would have been able to cut on to those things, but it was as if I needed a bit of reassurance. I needed something that
Mhm.
would pinpoint it for me so I could release that logical skeptical mind for a
Yeah.
moment to just dwell in the mystery of it. And that certainly was the case for me.
Yeah.
So before you share the report, again, I was there and I was listening to everyone's report, and I know everyone that received a report. And as I was listening to every single one of them, I just had this grin on my face the entire time because I thought, yeah, that's right. Yep.
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah, I saw you out of the corner of
Yeah,
my eye nodding over in the
yep.
corner. Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So that was a gift for me. So everyone who was present benefited from listening to the others, but I just wanted to just share that note as well. So tell us about you sitting there. Tell us what where you were just totally because I'm observing you and you are completely just listening.
Mhm.
And then when it comes time to asking questions, you just were very calm, collected, present, and then asked a question. So that was me observing you, and Paul probably can give you his observations of you as well. But what was that like for you receiving it in the moment?
Yeah, before he jumps in, the first part of the report gave some background that included some past lives
Mhm.
and little tidbits, little glimpses of different kinds of lives that you've had
Oh, we should
that
say that he did get
that
a
built.
dharma.
Yeah.
That's right. We haven't
So
said that
so the
yet.
different lifetimes that built up towards this collection of you-ness that is called the Dharma. Um, how did that strike you? Those glimpses.
Well, during the process, I mean, I was just trying to be as present as possible, just in the moment here. And I didn't get a chance to really get into the content of the report until I had a chance to listen to it again.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so like the undergoing the report itself was its own experience. Having you there, having Capucine there, having Christine there doing the reporting, and it was, for me, it was one of my all-time highlights, just being present in that space with all of you, receiving this tremendous gift that was just coming out. And so I was just trying to be completely open. I wasn't articulating it. I wasn't trying to analyze it. I was just sort of receiving it in that moment. Being in the hot seat in that moment, it's just like, okay, it's on. And I just really did have to surrender. And I had witnesses there to hear it with me. I had to just be open to what was being provided. And so I wasn't even, articulating it until
Hmm.
after the session when I had a chance to really think about what I heard and then read the report once I transcribed it. Also listen to the report after you sent it to me. And I've listened to it multiple times. And each time I listen to it, there's another little layer or level to it that I can hear
Hmm.
um, or take in and process. And so I'll be curious, a year from now when I listen to it again, what do I hear now compared to what am I hearing
Yeah.
then?
Yeah. You
So I
So
will
have
too.
it.
You
so
will.
Yeah.
tell us, Barth, give us an overview of what your report said. And
Okay.
again,
So
it was a Dharma report. So go
yeah.
ahead, tell us.
Yeah. Paul asked a question. The first question was relating the Dharma for the past and present lifetimes in terms of incarnations. And there was this dramatic pause right after he had asked that question. And so it was a long pause before
Uh-huh.
Christine reported on that question specifically. Um, and the first word that I heard was serenity. And
Hmm.
in the reporting of that question, um, um, it touched on the cultivation of discipline over many different lifetimes. Um, that includes physical discipline, mental discipline, emotional discipline, and there was some specific specifics about lifetimes when, say, the physical discipline was cultivated.
Hmm.
I That was one of the things that just I was like, what? Okay, I
Like
I've got to
what?
start
We want
paying more.
details.
I need to start paying more attention here, and I need to
Yeah.
do a little homework too.
Yeah.
So through the teaching of Shaolin, that was a lifetime in China.
Hmm.
And I don't know much about Shaolin. My brother lived in China for about 20 years. Um, and this is something that I get to now revisit if I want to and learn a little bit about that. I'm intrigued. I want to know a little bit more about that lifetime. Um, and there was a lifetime where I developed mental discipline. Um, in order to stay alive. There was a
Yeah.
uh, something relating to that lifetime that required me to really develop and hone that. And emotional discipline when I was responsible for um, the livelihood and the safety of others.
I thought that
So
was one of the
yeah,
more interesting ones, the emotional discipline, because you don't hear about that
Hmm.
often. You hear about mental discipline and physical, but the emotional discipline I thought was, um, wow, we need more of that these days, Um,
yeah,
Would
it's
you mind? Do you mind if I just read it for you?
no,
It,
please.
it says there was a
yeah.
lifetime when this one was on a ship, and this one sailed long distances with very few people, where this one was needed to develop and have emotional discipline for the cooperation, the livelihood, and the safety of others.
Mhm.
So that was just just picture that being out on
Mhm.
water.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you
But
can't freak out.
can't
You
freak
got to
out.
s- pull it together and keep it together and be a rock for others when they
Mm-hmm.
start freaking out. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, what's interesting about it is I never considered myself as someone who is disciplined. And my wife had to remind me when she listened to the report and give me many examples in which I am.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's,
I never had identified myself as someone like that. I always imagined myself as I need to be more disciplined. I am very undisciplined. I need to sit, you know, but I can
Isn't
see
that amazing?
how, but many of these, the culmination of the dharma from past lives here's where it really struck a chord with me about, okay, what does that mean now in the present lifetime? And we see in this, I'm going to read this part, okay? It says, we see in the present time period that this one is in a position where this one can access all of this simultaneously.
Mhm.
And so I I can see how the physical, mental, and emotional disciplines are working together right now in my life in order to provide me my next stage of growth. And I don't know if that means it's like a development of like spiritual discipline or something, but I am in a position where I have to exercise these simultaneously all the time. Like Capucine, you're an educator. Paul, you're coming from education. You know how it like being in the presence of children, you do have to, run on all cylinders. It's the physical, it's the emotional, it's the mental,
Mhm.
all at the same time. Um, so I can see how that like works in my present lifetime in a very practical way. Um,
I'm going to
so
just
yeah.
intercept just to kind of rem help the listeners understand it a little bit better. Right in the beginning, it says this. We see that this one has invested much of this one's time, attention, and awareness through many lifetimes, where this one cultivated the discipline in all levels of consciousness or awareness. So, I mean, that one, for me, that's just saying a lot. Then it just gave two examples, specifically Shaolin, China, another time when you're on a ship, emotional discipline.
Mhm.
So for me, that right there, that beginning tells me a lot of that you have understandings, not just in discipline, but in different levels of consciousness, which is, I think, fascinating to explore that for the rest of your life,
Well, I think
actually.
we should pause and say, what is discipline?
Yeah, that's right.
We're sort of talking around it, but what is the essence of discipline?
Mhm.
If we can tease it apart and look at the layers or components of it.
Hmm.
Is it stillness, or is it single pointedness, or Is it a combination of factors?
Is it being present? And in that present moment, all of those things are activated?
Mm-hmm. Or is it a deeper knowing of what everything is and why we're here and all of that, and you bring that to the show?
Yeah. And is it all of those things?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the way I understand it is just bringing one's full self into it, whatever that is that you're doing. And it's a harnessing or focusing of energies into a specific area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I see discipline. Specifically, like more recently, I've had another lesson on discipline, but it related to a lot of instability, trying to find um, like equanimity in the eye of the storm, like trying to be present in situations that are extremely demanding, whether those be like just psychological turmoil or being actually in situations where it feels chaotic, like in a classroom setting, and how to have the discipline in order to come back into the present moment in order to know how to navigate through it without contributing to conflict or chaos, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been like my lesson right now on discipline. And it's been I don't know where that fits. Well, I do know how it fits because the report is saying that this is a time where I am where the culmination of the disciplines have are now accessible to me right now in this present lifetime. And so I guess what I'm trying to do is learn like what are those levels of consciousness and how do I um begin to fold them into my current life in the way in whatever situation I'm finding myself in
Mm-hmm.
for um for I guess just developing a better sense of um like just trust and understanding.
Yeah. Maybe a place to start is considering what isn't discipline. Like, what does not disciplined mentally or emotionally or physically look like and feel like? And then maybe that will reveal what discipline is if we strip away the things that it's not. Like, what would emotionally not disciplined look like?
Well, I know it is for me. We might have different definitions, but mine is it's just a path of avoidance. It's the path of distraction.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
could be emotional avoidance.
Mm.
Um, or it could be like quick to anger, or
Mm.
could be
Unstable.
unstable, chaotic emotions, or very little self-control with emotions,
Mm.
or manipulation, or some of the darker aspects of emotion. So if you
Mhm.
take those off the table, what's left is, I think you may have hit on it with the presence. Like,
Mhm.
you can be present emotionally, you can be present mentally, like in a chaotic classroom. That's a good example. That's a really good example. And you can be present physically. You're not leaving the room, and you're not um, leaping to outrage or defensiveness or manipulation. You're just present and mindful in the
Mm-hmm.
choices that you make and the direction that you move mentally, emotionally, and physically.
And for someone who's experienced and observed how you are emotionally in situations, I have seen the very few times when you've either gotten irritated or angry. And even then, it has, and I'm not even going to say it's a level of controlled. It's just that you have an ability to ride it. And
Mm.
for this is another thing about you that people don't know is that you're also a swimmer. And I always Just imagine you moving with water really fluidly. Just you had a grace to it. You had a sense of being one with the water and moving. And that's how I would always describe how you were with your emotions. And then you would be able to come back and view your own experience with others and how others were still present with it, not detached, but still part of it.
Mm.
Yeah. So there were ways that I was able to observe that in many different ways.
Fluidity is
very much so
important aspect. Maybe flexibility as well with that.
Yeah.
And again, that's moving through consciousness. I mean, it's moving through those different levels of consciousness, which, and also you are an artist, you're a visual artist. And you also have a scientific mind.
Yeah.
So would be other things for you to explore about how you navigate using those skill sets.
Left brain, right brain integration. And
yeah, and actually that builds into the next question that was asked. And I wanted to know specifically about the question of where should I be putting my attention during this transitional phase of my life? It was a very short answer, but it was sort of wrapped in a lot of mystery for me because this was sort of the first clue that I need to start paying more attention. And it does play into what you just said, Capucine, about this need for constant move and constant flow. You know, there is a way to move through life without contributing to the chaos, and I'm learning that as a teacher myself. And so here's what was said. Okay.
So ask the question. You asked the question. So say the question first.
All right. This one asks where he should be putting his attention during this transitional phase of life. And here's what was reported. It would be helpful for this one to explore the infinity symbol, to draw it, to move the body in a way that outlines the infinity symbol, to contemplate it, to explore it. The answer is in the question. That's it. And
I love it.
right. So it's like
a lot of time doing that.
But you know, besides maybe you, Capucine, who else in the room would have caught that? Right. So it's funny because have spent a lot of time exploring the infinity symbol in part for my own dissertation about integrating the inner and outer landscapes of teacher practice, but also just internally of reconciling what does this thing mean when it's folded in on itself. It's very I know Taoist in its kind of thinking about polarities, about how the universe works, how, you know, and so I find myself spending a lot of time on that specific concept. It was just sort of a reinforcer for me to continue to think about these things that are very complicated to think about. Now, in the report, the infinity symbol and infinity was described 4 separate times in different ways, but interrelated ways. And so it continued to kind of bring me back into an understanding of where can I be putting my attentions when things do get complicated, when things do start to fall apart, when I'm going through my little existential funk or crisis, like where do I start putting the attention to so that I can kind of understand how this thing actually works?
Yeah.
And I just found it just fascinating that the symbol that was chosen for me was the one that I could best receive, which is the symbol of the infinity.
Yeah. It's the most familiar for you. It's like a home base for you. Yeah.
Right.
And there was no way for the reporter to, know that beforehand. She'd never met you. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's pretty ironic too that your anchor point is infinity. That doesn't seem right, but
well, it also
was just right.
Again, because the 3 of us are in the world of teaching and learning, education. Um, uh, and all like I, I'm jumping maybe into the future while I'm still here, but I just keep thinking, what a great gift once you start unfolding what that means, Quenz, and what that means to you in your own experience, how that can apply in so many other areas of your life. But what another gift I mean, you're already going to be giving more by what reveals itself to you in answering this question for yourself, which will be of benefit to many other people. So it's a gift that keeps on giving. Infinity.
Yeah, I think so too, because the next time it's spoken about is in relationship to a question that Paul asked. Paul asked, "What is the relevance of this one's dharma related to this one's lifetime?" And so in that, there's this description of my life, at times me experiencing the self and life as a paradox. And
Mm.
there's this need to hold these contradictions. Like this is what I find myself in relationship to my life is often a contradiction for me, something that is very difficult to reconcile. Um,
How
and
so? What do you
how
mean?
so?
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, yeah. So I mean, like how I want to be or how I want to show up is not always the way that I'm able to show up for others, for instance. There's a tension. Um, my vision for how I would want um, my life to be or something is not uh, let me take a step back here. So what I'm trying to do right now, my rational brain is trying to come in and trying to have a logical explanation for something that cannot be explained logically.
Mm.
So that is the essence of the paradox. And so
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, part of the lesson, and I just have to go back to the report because it says it very clearly. So the need to be able to hold the contradiction, I see it as a like holding the creative tension. Like the universe is built on these creative tensions. That's what gives us its energy. And there's a need to be able to hold what is perceived as contradictions simultaneously. And that was explained in the report that part of what I'm doing right now is just like learning how to do that. Hold two contradicting things in my mind simultaneously.
Hmm.
And then the report says this is what is here's where infinity comes up again. This is related to what has been spoken of regarding the infinity symbol. All of it exists. There is no escaping wholeness. This one at times is distracted by the truth of this with logic. And so the recommendation in the report is something that I have begun to recognize in myself too. And I have a default into this hyper analytical way of thinking about the world that does not help me in these situations where logic fails to really contribute. It has its purpose, but there's some places where it does not belong because there
Yeah.
is that's where the intuitive mind, I think, steps in and says, let me help you understand this a little bit more holistically.
Yeah.
And there's not a need to, you know, default to analysis. And so this is what the report says. This is not a problem. It is simply an indication for this one to relax the mind, to surrender the habit of mental discipline. And then there's some suggestions on possibly how I might be able to do that.
Hmm. And
Um,
very often the mental discipline can be a linear thought process
yeah.
or even a matrix thought process, but even that is segmented and linear.
Hmm.
And it's saying, hang on, maybe just relax and hold everything all at once in the
Right.
picture, like a
But
Zen koan.
exactly, exactly. And so that's where the mystery deepens because some of the responses are framed as little koans
Hmm.
that would require some like unlocking over a greater kind of arc of understanding. And so here's where the plot thickens for me, and it comes in with the next question, because I'm very concerned and curious about these mental, physical, and spiritual challenges that I've been having over the course of this year. And um, the report touches upon something that I know so well because I've been through it this year, but no one else would have the context. I've explained a little bit about this, talked to you, Cap, I've seen about what's kind of going on internally. I've talked to my wife about it, so she totally knows. And when she heard this in the report, it really resonated heavily with her too. But when I heard this, it's like, okay, here we go. And here is the project. And it
So-
related to
So the question was,
the question was, um, this one asks for insights into this one's mental, physical, and spiritual challenges in this lifetime. Um, so for me to hear that what I'm going through is not more than what I can handle, that this is part of my experience, was important for me to hear. But there is this sense of like urgency, and urgency was another word that came up in the report multiple times through multiple contexts for me to really hear it. Because what I'm experiencing is I saw it as this battle of light and dark that was playing out, and that was the last question I asked, and we'll get to that in a moment. But there, the way it was framed in the report was as a way that I felt like, okay, um, all is not lost. I can work with this, and I can work through the challenges that I'm facing. What I'm experiencing is a sense of urgency. In the report, it says there is at times an urgency that is overwhelming to this one related to wholeness. So relating to wholeness, which comes back again. And so the way that I can attend to the wholeness is by, again, holding these potentially contradictory things like light and dark, right? And holding them together to see how, um, you know, they are interdependent, um, and related. And that is how it just works. But in the moments of like the dark night of the soul, the existential crisis, when it is descending on like me, when it's coming in, it is extremely intense. But that intensity is simply a sense of urgency for me to understand um, wholeness again. And the recommendation was something I needed to hear. And this is where infinity pops up a third time. It says, when this occurs, it is suggested that this one acknowledge a timelessness, boundlessness, infinity. So that this one can settle into the divinity of the present moment.
Yeah, I think anytime that urgency comes up into a report, it's actually pretty common. People just want to resolve this tension that they're feeling, and I just want this tension to be released or done with so that I can have peace again in my mind, peace in my life. And very often the suggestion is to just go beyond the two poles that you're holding in your mind, the light and the dark, the up and the down, the right and the wrong. Just go a little bit farther than that into this timelessness or eternalness or infinity. And that automatically encompasses both. And you see them both sitting there inside of that arena. And you say, oh, it's part of everything. It's not, I have to go this way or this way. Which way do I go? Which one is the right thing to do? Which one is the right way?
And I think for me, a little bit further up in your report, it talks about your ability. I have to go back and read it again. That you have invested much of your time and attention and awareness through many lifetimes, cultivated disciplines and multiple levels of consciousness. So there's a quality that you have, a skill of bringing the attention and awareness. Level of that is discipline of understanding how to move through consciousness. And then we go back to this question, and it says this part. It is not so much the content of the challenge as how you respond to it. So a lot of hefty, meaty stuff was said right before that, which you already stated. But for me, it's like, goodness, I'm going to respond. And again, so the way you respond is where you're going to put your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to figure the whole thing out. It's not so much about the content. I mean, some of that will come back to you as you move through it. Again, the water, moving through the water, it'll come back to you as to, I was able to move through this and that as of this, but in that moment, I needed to respond with a little bit more fluidity and flexibility.
Yeah. We hear about the four limbic system responses from the amygdala, the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Maybe there's a fifth one, which is integrate. I can't think of a good F word. Well, maybe there is a good F word, but yeah, the other option is to, instead of seeing the tiger attacking, maybe you are both in a dance together and there's wholeness and there's integration. So there isn't an enemy anymore.
Which goes back to those Shaolin moves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It is interesting because the more I do contemplate this, and I am learning a practice of meditation right now, there is a martial art that happens on the inside, and it is movement based. And so I'm learning how to move with that because those energies are always in motion too, and they're not static. And I've sort of learned that absolutely the hard way out of this, because when it was recommended to me that I learn how to surrender and just simply recognize the timelessness, boundlessness of all of that. This is in order, and the report says, in order for this one to settle and calm in the realms that consciousness expresses itself through. And so there's no need to fight it. It's a very different experience of surrender, but within the surrender, there's a lot of agency within that. And there's a process of moving through it too. So this would actually get us into the last question. You want to go there?
Sure.
This was one I was really wanting to ask. I'm glad I saved it for last, because here is another for me, one of those little Zen koans in here. It's it was the mic drop of the entire report for me. And I was like, there it is. I needed to hear that. Oh, okay. Say no more.
I know, it was funny. Go ahead.
So here's the question. And this related to the battle of light and dark that was playing this story inside of me over this course of a year. This is how the question was asked. This one asks about his experience of a battle of light and dark playing out in him, and asks for insights and guidance. The response to this one was pretty quick. The response was, would suggest to this one to drop the defensiveness within the self. There is no need to defend the Tao. Enough said. There is no need to defend the Tao. I really needed to hear that. So what I was perceiving as this battle, and the report expands on this. What was perceived as a battle or interpreted as a battle is, in a sense, is simply a sense of urgency and overwhelm that is part of this evolutionary sorting that's happening. And that was what was said in the report. So again, that sense of urgency comes back. And so what I'm perceiving as this battle is simply an urgency within me to attend to the thing that needs to be attended to.
And that's bringing the presence. your presence to whatever is on your plate at the time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so when it does feel like overwhelming, here was the suggestion from the report. So as this one yields to the intensity, this one will not be overwhelmed with it. This does not mean annihilation from the intensity, although it can feel that way at some times. So very few would have understood that the process I have been going through in my own development has felt annihilating. You know, it literally breaks me down to the point where there are no frameworks, no belief systems, no paradigms that can potentially operate anymore. They literally shatter. It's like a little ego death where there's nothing to grasp onto anymore, and it feels like a void. And it is a very um, unsettling and sometimes scary experience to not have anything to grasp onto anymore. And so I really needed to hear that. I needed to hear that, although it may feel like you're being annihilated. That's not what this is. That's not, you're not going to be annihilated. You're still here. And I've gone through the process enough to have a little bit of trust of that there is something on the other side
Yeah.
of the experience.
You will still
No
exist. Yeah.
exactly. So no matter how kind of difficult and dark it gets, um, there is just simply a need to yield. Just yield to it. Stop fighting it. Yield to it. Take it in and let it go. Move through it. Exactly, Capucine. Move, move through it, and embrace the. Here's where infinity comes into the fourth time. It's just like acknowledge that one exists. Acknowledge infinity. That's it.
And then again, when we say that's it, that is true. And then
Yeah.
it comes to the day-to-day life of you doing that.
Yeah.
Then comes the
the
doing.
after the report part.
Yeah, exactly. Then comes the hard part of biting into the sandwich
Yeah.
we've
Have you
constructed.
found that these phrases just kind of pop into your head during the day, or these concepts will just sometimes they'll haunt you or sometimes they'll inspire you, but they'll just pop in.
Yeah, I mean, I will think about when I need to. There's no need to defend the Tao. So when things start to intensify again, and I think that I'm needing to engage in a way that's like a fighting way. It's that fight or flight mode kicking in. That limbic system is saying, "Oh no, this is not psychologically safe anymore. You need to find your way out. You need to find an escape. You need to fight it. You need to fight it." I've learned how to say no. I am going to be present for it, and I don't care how hard it gets because I've seen the other side, and the other side is beautiful, blissful, and it's embracing and loving and warm. And so I know that there is a reason to, I don't know what the reason is fully of why we have to go through painful experiences in life. I don't know that. Why does life have to be painful in order to learn from it? But my experience has taught me that the need to yield and surrender is, I mean, that's the lesson. But yielding and surrendering to something so intense.
There's a reward in that.
Yeah. And that's for me, that's the new discipline I'm learning. It's like, how do I yield to something that is so intense that does feel like it's going to annihilate me, but yet I know from experience that there is another side to this.
Yeah.
And so it's the need to be present and persist through it.
And the more often you go through this process, the more readily you can trust that there is another side and that there is an after this process. There is a clearing that happens on the other side. You know, the first ones they're hell. But after about 5 of these punctuation marks, you start going, oh, okay, here it comes again. I just got to ride this out.
Yeah.
I just got to ride it. And
I'm on the way. I'm on the wave.
There will be an end to this and a completion and an integration. And the more I fight it, the longer it's going to prolong it.
Yeah, Paul, I was exactly going to say the same thing. We've talked
Yeah.
about the storylines that we have told ourselves. It's
Hmm.
it's the story. Boy, this is what's happening, and oh my God, it feels like this, and jeepers criminy, I wish it was that. Yeah, we just make it so big. And I think when I heard the word, kind of have to drop the defensiveness. And I know Christine also shared with everyone at the end of, she reminded everyone it just requires you to please be honest with yourself from what you're hearing. Because really that defensiveness is not, it doesn't always come in the form of, wait a minute, you know, I I don't believe what you're saying. I mean, it doesn't have to come out so angry. Sometimes it's just, well, no, this is true. This is really what's happening to me,
Yeah.
and I can't get over it. There's not anger in that, but boy, you keep defending that it's real.
Yeah.
So it's like you live in this storyline. We've all done it. And you'll continue to do it until eventually you'll recognize, oh, there you go again. You're telling
Hmm.
yourself this story, Barth.
I think there's great power in that where,
Hmm.
yeah, the stance
Yeah,
is kind of, huh, look at that.
there you go.
Instead of, oh boy, I'm bracing for impact, you just
Yeah.
go, well, look at that.
Yeah, look
Here
at me
comes
doing
again.
that thing.
Yeah.
And and
But that takes discipline. That takes
that's right.
mental, emotional discipline to
That's
just
right.
take a deep breath and just go, all right, we're gonna ride this through.
Yeah.
Look at
That's-
that. Interesting. I was giving a or part of a talk last night. We were doing a talk on reincarnation and past lives and such. And I I mentioned a process that I think is really powerful. It's an exercise, more or less, where you challenge yourself to not say the word I or me or my or mine and see how long you can go, either in a conversation or just talking with someone. And it messes with you. It starts breaking apart just that little thing of just eliminating the self-reference. It starts breaking apart this ego structure of you. Your attention goes to what is happening, the flow of energy, the other people, but it's not self-referential. And there's a that ego part of you longs for attention. And it says, what about me? How do I relate with this? I want to tell my story. I want to tell my side of this. Me, me, me. That's the part that gets crusty, that story of the self and the survival of this identity. But it's a surface identity. That's not the real you that survives the crumbling process.
Yeah, and that's what will be annihilated
Yeah.
when you
The
move when you move through.
temporary
Yeah, that's
I.
what when you move through it.
Yeah. And you've had many I's throughout your life. You've had I as a kid, and you've had I and me as a teenager, and as a college student, and as an employee, and as a young uh, husband. And all of these are various I's that you stick to yourself and layer and layer and layer. And pretty soon, it's like you're wearing 16 shirts and 7 pairs of pants.
It has been a very interesting experience this year watching the ego reconstruct itself. You know,
It
once
tries
it's been
desperately to
shattered,
build back.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll build itself back, but it
Yeah.
builds itself back with different paradigms. And I remember at some point my ego got a taste for the transcendent, and that became its own little problem. Once it started to want more of that, but it's like the bigger the ego gets, the more difficult and more painful it is when it has to kind of shatter. And it's just I don't know why that's part of the learning, the arc of learning in this.
Yeah.
But it seems to be, from my perspective, it's been um, just yeah, part of that arc
I think it
for
may be
consider.
a package deal. Just you have a body, you get an ego. It's part of being here on this planet on in this time period, in this cycle of consciousness. It's a package deal, and we just have to learn about it and learn its little ways and be able to maneuver with it. And um, Yeah, just know more about it and how to work with it.
And the
Hmm.
report is always going to indicate suggestions, as you already stated, of things to do. It's always been pretty consistent of recommending seeking a teacher, someone that you trust. But I wanted to ask you, but let me ask you this. Do you have any questions for us? Do you want to talk about something else maybe that we haven't talked about, or something that you're curious, or maybe with Paul, since he's part of the dynamic duo?
Right. Well, I mean, I always kind of want to know like how things work, why they work. I don't know if some of those questions are even answerable. Like, um, let me ask a question about that's come directly from the report here, okay? And maybe you
Mhm.
have context based on some other reports. But this one was this came up in the last question. Um, and it says relating to this sense of urgency and overwhelm that is part of this evolutionary sorting. So like what do you think that means when it's talking about um, the evolutionary sorting that's happening? What does
Good
that mean?
question. Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
Hmm.
We touched on it in the Atlantean uh,
Hmm.
programs about these cycles of learning and cycles of development and evolution. Um, I think key to those kinds of cycles is remembering wholeness and remembering that there is only wholeness and that there's this illusion of separateness. There's this illusion of I'm different than you and I'm separate from you, and that there is segmentation in everything that I experience. We create that illusion just having bodies and senses, separate senses, and we tend to think as separate. So remembering this wholeness idea and remembering also that we've taken this excursion, consciousness has taken this excursion into matter, exploring this density of this world, and is now in the process of trying to remember its origin as well as being able to navigate this dense physical world and integrate all of that together. So I think that's this sorting process of what is true, what is illusion, what am I, where did I come from, and sorting all of this stuff out. Ultimately, I think there's just one of us here, and um, it's all one big soup. And there's the food analogy yet again. But we have to come to terms with the individual ingredients in the soup and recognize everyone brings their own flavor, and oh, this is just one soup that we're in. I don't know if that helps, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, my take is very similar. I think I'll just have a different way of articulating it. I think of it as I would pose it as a question to you, anyone listening, but just think of 5 people in your life, in your current lifetime, right now, your friends, neighbors, doesn't matter. Pick 5 people in your life. And you can probably tell me a little bit about the story that they're telling themselves in their life. This is the experience I'm having. This is the story that I keep telling myself is occurring. And it could be anything. It could be they're frustrated with the politics, or it doesn't matter. But
Hmm.
just pick 5 people, and every 5 people will tell you about where they are in their current evolutionary um, experience right now, what human experience they are having. And some of them are more engrossed, physically engrossed. In other words, if, and I'm just not to be political, I'm just choosing it because it's in my mind. But some people really will be devastated if one person gets elected versus another. That will destroy their livelihood. That will destroy their life, their way of living, their way of their perspective, their view on life. So I always think of, if you can stand back, if every person would just stand back from whatever story is in their human experience right now, and they start asking different questions about their own place in this storyline of evolution, then they would have to start sorting out what their place is in this story that we're all contributing to.
Good. Yeah.
Right? That's how I would see this sorting that's occurring.
Yeah.
And for me, there's always that answer is it's about wholeness. I remember years ago, not that I follow this person, but there was an essence of truth to him. And I think it was Billy Graham. It said that he felt that humanity was going through a spiritual crisis. Now, that has been said by other people in different times. Maybe I wouldn't use those words, but I understand what he meant about that. So that's what I think. So just pick 5 people and then start thinking of your own life, right? Of what is where am I standing that I have to keep defending?
Yeah.
And then removing myself a little bit more and a little bit more so I have a greater sense of vision and objectivity. And then you start asking different questions. And then it goes back to what one of your answers were in your report, Quenz, which was the answer is in the question. If you don't ask those questions from a different perspective, you're probably just going to keep going around this little cycle, kind of running around, and you're not going to go through this infinity. You're just going to go in a circle.
Yeah.
That's my answer. That's where I land on it today.
Yeah. Yeah, the way I interpreted it was, I think similar to what you just described, but I was thinking in terms of like vibrational experience. Like what I'm moving through right now feels like I'm moving from something that's low vibration to something that's a higher vibration. And that shift has required not only some internal changes, like psychological changes, subtle body changes, energy changes in my own system, but it's required, I think, even some physical changes in me to raise my own vibration. And I can feel myself sometimes kind of slipping back into this lower vibrational experience where it is very dense. Like you just said, Paul, it's a very dense experience. And that's how I interpret this evolutionary sorting. Like we're all trying to move through the experience in the best way that we know how, and it is a challenging. The experience is always going to be challenging, but it's a different kind of challenge. When we intentionally set out to say raise the vibrational frequency of our own experience. I do this little intonation calibrator that I do with myself to kind of check in with where my body's at sometimes. And I noticed the shift. I want to tell you this because this is interesting. This happened after the report. But I do these little kind of like sound experiments. And there's an app on your phone that you can get to measure what tone or tonality, say your singing bowl's coming in at, or your voice or an instrument is. I think people probably use it to like tune their guitars, but you can do it to like with your own voice, and have a little practice that I do using the Hue meditation. Are you familiar with that? Okay. And so that creates a like an intonation that comes from deep down in the body. And for a period of time, my intonation was coming in at like a C note, which is where, say, the root chakra would be coming in at. That's sort of the vibrational cadence of, say, the root chakra. After the report, I had a series of interesting, I would maybe even potentially call them mystical things happen that somehow shifted the intonality of my biofield or resonance. And it shifted from a C note into an A note for me more recently. And the A note is that the third eye, that's the intuitive chakra. And I thought that was an interesting correlation because it coincided with an inquiry that was very much originally around like, how do I ground myself in a reality that feels so unstable? And that is where my internal tone was resonating at, say, the root chakra, that was the C note. It shifted from a C to an A in a matter of days as I began to think more and more about allowing the intuitive side of me to have space to sort of like reclaim part of that for me. And I thought that was an interesting correlation. That's just something that has happened on its own.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a consequence of being able to sit with it and having a little bit more intention around it of like, how do I invite the intuitive side of me back into my life to provide its own insight and wisdom and guidance. What do you guys think of that?
I think that's a good thing for you to sort through.
Yeah.
I know,
That's
right?
part of, that's what it's
That does
saying.
sound like sorting. Yeah.
That sounds like you're sorting through it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you are probably well aware that you have all of those notes sounding simultaneously.
Mhm.
You might be more predominantly C or A or F or G
Mhm.
in different circumstances,
Different moments in
at different
time.
times of day.
Yep.
So a predominance, though, of brow chakra might be I'm I'm favoring the intuitive realm a little bit more. It's a little bit more predominant than relating to the world through root chakra, through getting things done and making things happen and standing my ground and,
Mhm.
thinking about physical concerns of the world. I'm just shifting more up to seeing the world a little bit differently. All of those are still going on, but it's just a more prevalent or more presence.
And then
Yeah.
all of that goes back to your intuitive report, Quenz, about your different disciplines of attention and awareness in different levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's
A
just
fun
giving,
exercise is to
that's right.
like go all the way through all of them,
Uh-huh.
shift from the concerns of the world up to maybe what is my personal power and what is my connection to other
Mhm.
people and where is my compassion and what is my particular voice expression in the world and how do I see connectedness and just rising up through that elevator and maybe back down again. And that's a particular discipline.
Do you guys want to hear a wild story to end it on?
Heck yeah.
Okay.
I don't.
You don't?
I'm not
It's
interested in
too
wild
far.
Oh,
It might
stories.
yeah.
be too far out though.
No, it's I'm teasing
Um,
you.
so okay, for this, I'm gonna ask you to just kind of suspend your logical analytical mind for just a little bit as I tell you the story, okay? Because
Done.
there may be a rational logical explanation for what I'm about to say, and I'd love to hear that too, that side of it, because it takes both. It's the intuitive side and the analytical side. They both have something to contribute. So each morning I have a morning daily practice where I have a sitting meditative contemplative moment in my morning. And in that, I light a candle and I typically burn a little Palo Santo to kind of get the setting right for me. And then I go through my little contemplation for that morning. Well, on this particular morning, the candle wick had gone all the way out in the little glass that I had it in the little glass container, and so I had to replace the candle. I did notice that the candle or the glass had a bit of soot, black soot from the earlier time, and wax on the bottom, and there was this little sticker on the bottom of the glass I had never taken off, like a price sticker. And I kind of just thought, geez, if my intent is to have to bring clarity of insight in my morning contemplations, at least I could have a clean glass while doing it. So I did spend some time getting off the soot and cleaning out the wax. And I sat back down and getting ready for my contemplation. And right before I light the Palo Santo on my candle, I let out a little burp, and a little puff of smoke comes right out of my mouth. Right after that, another little burp, little puff of smoke comes out of my mouth. And before my mind has a chance to really catch on to what's going on and start that process of what was that? What is going on here? I could taste something in the back of my tongue, sort of this gritty kind of taste. It didn't taste bad. It kind of tasted, I don't know, kind of like a perfumey, almost sweet, a little kind of floral, but definitely something back there. So I went out to the garden, spit on the ground, and there was this black soot. Spit again, more black soot. Spit a third time in my hand so I could take a closer look. And indeed, it was grainy and sooty and black. And now I'm thinking, what the heck is happening here? What is going on here? I go and rinse out, gargle, and get whatever's in the back of my mouth out and come back and sit down and with the intention of completing my morning contemplation. But my mind can't focus on the text that I'm reading. Like I read little
Yeah.
Krishnamurti text to get my contemplation going. My mind won't read it. My mind's too busy. My mind is it's already asking questions. What was that? We want some answers. We need an explanation here. So I closed my book and just closed my eyes and just kind of sat with it. What I noticed was a conversation between two parts of myself. One was the analytical side saying, I demand answers. I want to know what that was. There's got to be an explanation for what has occurred. There's another voice that entered the conversation and it stepped in and says, um, you don't need to know. You just need to steep in the mystery of it. Relish in the moment. Just be. Let it be. The analytical mind was very demanding. The intuitive mind was insistent also, but in a very gentle way, saying, just let it go. And so it was a chance for me to see those internal parts sort of playing itself out in me in an experience I couldn't fully understand and grasp. Now, later on in the day, I did find my own little logical explanation for what had just happened.
Of course you did.
I couldn't help it because I had to appease the logical part of me too. But at the same time, I still hold that little space, and there was a special moment where it's like I just needed to hear that I had a side of me that honors the mystery of it. And it doesn't require answers all the time. There is another way of understanding life, and it's not through seeking, a rational explanation.
Yeah.
That's the story.
It's a wonderful story.
You know what comes
Wild?
to mind? You're not going to like this, but infinity. The infinity symbol. If you turn it on its side and it's this figure eight, and we've talked about this on other shows too. Um, there's the up experience, the spiritual and the mystical, and then there's the physical, rational approach to it. hey, I must have breathed something in and must have, and then there's the intersection of the two circles right in the middle, right there where there is neither is favored, and you're just going, huh, look at that. I have no need to decide which way I'm gonna go, this way or this way. It's both, and it's right smack in the middle of both of them. I am entirely neutral and present. It's both. It's whole at the same time.
Last question that we have for you. What are your thoughts on the mysteries of creation? And you can reword that however you would like to.
I think there's like just a profound silence happening in me, and that itself is my answer.
All
Profound
right.
silence.
I could
Ah,
feel that. Yeah.
that's right.
You were looking and searching and searching and looking, and nothing showed up.
It's that freedom from the known. It's just it's making the a leap across that cosmic void. It's just or leaping into the void rather.
Mhm. Paul, anything else you want to ask Quenzer before we say thank you and what a joy it was to talk to you?
No, I have a feeling I'm gonna meet up with him again when we have another session, I believe. He might be curious by then.
That's right.
I am curious. I think my wife might want one too when she's ready.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to do like a family crossing too at some point.
Oh, there you go.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
that would be
Mhm.
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, well, Meredith is a gem. And so I think you guys are just wonderful explorers and wonderful parents for just everything you're doing for your kids. And I'm just going to keep saying this. I always leave you with this, but you know how much I love you. And I'm just going to keep saying it. I love you. I just love you. I'm glad you're in my life again in this round of the turn.
I'm pretty sure we've done this in another lifetime, haven't we? A version of this?
A version of it. I think
Yeah.
we're doing
Primitive
what we can
podcast
to
of some
do
sort.
the next stage of it here.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Paul, and thanks, Capucine, for inviting me for this really stimulating conversation.
Thank you for coming on. Once Upon a Quantum Leap is for your reference only. This podcast and the material is intended solely as educational information and should not be used for diagnosis or treatment of any health problem, financial, or legal advice.
You can listen to full episodes and find out about Paul and Capucine at onceuponaquantumleap.com. All reports shared on this show have been released with permission, and identifiers have been removed for individuals' privacy.
The intuitive reports referred to in each episode are available on our website, on the podcast page, and through links in our show notes. We encourage you to listen to those for greater context.
If you're interested in obtaining your own intuitive report, go to quantuminsight.co. That's quantuminsight.co. You can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.